Don?
Thank you, Dave. Are we overspending our natural capital? The truth is, I'm not ready for that question. And we are not ready for that question, even though we all know the answer to it. We've seen the graphs on carbon dioxide accumulation in the atmosphere. We've seen the downward trends in wild fish stocks, the accumulation of toxic and biologically active chemicals in our rivers and in our bodies. We've seen the accelerating loss and fragmentation of natural habitats. We've seen the continuing depletion of native soil organic matter, the slow winking out of our old-growth forests. The list goes on, and we all know that list, and we know the shapes of the time course graphs. Now, as I drove here from the BC interior in the comfort of a quiet air-conditioned car, sipping an expensive cappuccino in an expensive travel mug, listening to Puccini operas on a CD as I zipped across the landscape on all-weather tires on a 4-lane divided highway, doing 120 kilometers an hour through the Rocky Mountains, I was having a technological epiphany. Everything around me was designed for my comfort, and even the landscape was there for my casual entertainment. And oddly enough, none of these technological comfort devices were built in my own country. The urge to be comfortable is a fundamental human motivator, but I think we're just supposed to strive to be comfortable. That's what we're good at, but I don't think we're supposed to actually get to the point of total comfort. But the suite of technology that surrounded me on my Rocky Mountain car ride actually made me fully comfortable. The real issue is, what are the personal and social rationalizations that we employ in order to continue living this consumptive lifestyle, which we know is not sustainable? That is the real question, but that is the one that takes us completely out of the realm of charts and graphs and parts per million and into the messy and uncomfortable world of social psychology and ethics. We live in what I call the era of indifference. In other words, we know what's happening to the earth, but we don't care. There was a time when ecological ignorance could be claimed as an excuse for the damage that we do to nature, but no longer. Splendid graphs and tables are now instantly available, providing minute detail on how we degrade our atmosphere, max out our energy resources, pollute our rivers, overplow our prairies, overcut our forests, overbuild our cities, and overdrive our roads. Information is not the bottleneck. Caring about that information and putting that information into an ethical framework, that's the bottleneck. Now, the sustainability of natural capital discussion can really be summed up in our use of energy. Somehow, we have allowed the profligate consumption of energy in the form of fossil fuels and hydro and nuclear to become the very heartbeat of our economy. And our primary response to the current energy crisis is to seek out new and alternative forms of energy production rather than acknowledging that all energy is finite. All forms of energy conservation have environmental downsides, and looking for ways to reduce energy consumption. Ecosystems, natural resources, and nature all have needs, and they have limits. They have thresholds and they have tipping points. They have trophic cascades and third-order consequences, several stages and feedback loops, natural disturbance patterns, and domains of attraction. Technology plus a separation from nature have allowed us to ignore all of those natural needs and limits. It is a truism that all wealth in the end comes from nature. We can all nod our heads in philosophical agreement with that statement, but really in our heart of hearts, we don't really believe it. And it is hard when you think of people making excellent livings, working on computers on the 40th floor of a concrete office tower in a large city completely surrounded by non-natural materials. In our contemporary social canon, nature is not sacred. The stark fact is that nature has actually a very low priority in our society. A huge plethora of social items come first before nature: economics, technology, transportation, real estate, lifestyle, recreation, convenience, comfort. In fact, that we use attitudes towards nature as one of the ways we distinguish primitive and advanced societies from one another. If your culture deems nature to be sacred, then you're primitive. If your society doesn't hold nature as sacred, then Bob's your uncle, you're advanced. All of the good stewardship work that you do and I do sooner or later runs up against this hard fact that nature is really not woven into the fabric of Canadian society. Now, books have been written about why this is the case. Is it the influence of technology? Is it capitalism? Is it the subjugation of women? The reasons for nature's low status do make for interesting debate, but that's for another day. Now, in a milieu such as this conference, when you're surrounded by people of similar interests and passions, it is easy to lose sight of the fact that to a very large segment of society, nature has no real meaning. It's not that they dislike it or are afraid of it, it simply isn't part of their life. And since we don't hold nature to be sacred or to even have a slightly elevated status, then every insult to nature, every overuse of natural capital can be rationalized away in some way. So here is my 2 cents. Yes, we are overspending our natural capital, and no, we don't want to admit it. Yes, we are living unsustainably for reasons that have to do with technology and a detachment from nature. And no, none of the measures we have imposed so far have changed our culture's trajectory away from eventual environmental collapse. And our current federal government, which should be providing the country with sustainability leadership, has totally abandoned that role. After listening to Preston Manning this morning, I thought, my God, I'm a conservative. But I'm an ecological conservative. I want ecologically balanced budgets. Avram Lazar, the head of the Forest Products Association and a pretty thoughtful fellow, had a sobering take on the issue of fossil fuel sustainability. He says that we could fully implement all of the projected energy conservation measures and fuel efficiencies and recycling programs and hybrid vehicles and voluntary reductions and mass transit passes and education programs and setback thermostats and you name it, and still not achieve any long-term sustainability in terms of either energy resources or climate change. Lazar says what is required is a total re-engineering of society away from fossil fuel consumption in all of its forms. Re-engineering. Here I am railing about the pernicious influence of technology, and then I see a potential solution couched in that ultimate technological term, re-engineering. But I think that Lazar is right, and I would even take his prescription a step further to a total re-engineering of society away from energy consumption in all of its forms, be it fossil, hydro, nuclear, solar, wind, or even biomass. The plain truth, which we all try so hard to avoid, is that the simplest, cleanest, and most sustainable form of energy is the energy that you don't use. So what is an acceptable level of consumption in this, the wealthiest of all societies in the history of our planet? Can we, or the market, ever say no, say enough already? As consumers, we did turn our backs on the Ford Edsel, and we turned our backs on thalidomide, and it looks like we might be turning our backs on the Hummer. But can we make broader consumer choices and begin reducing our overall consumption? Can we ever voluntarily step back to reduce consumption without some economic catastrophe or resource shortage that forces us to cut that.